Before we begin, I want you to think about someone you once cared about deeply, someone who seemed distant, someone who believed you would always remain the same, always available, always waiting. Now imagine this. What if the moment they became convinced you had finally moved on was the exact moment something inside them started changing? What if your silence spoke louder than all the times you explained yourself? What if your absence forced them to face feelings they spent months or years avoiding? Most people believe power comes from holding on tighter, proving more, loving harder. But human psychology reveals something unsettling. Sometimes people recognize your value only after they stop feeling certain of your presence. And here is the difficult truth. By the time some realize what you meant to them, you are no longer the same person they once knew. Because pain changes people. Disappointment changes people. Healing changes people. The version of you that begged to be understood slowly disappears, and someone stronger begins to emerge. Today we are going to explore why people often awaken emotionally after distance, why silence creates reflection, and what truly happened depends when you stop chasing, stop proving, and finally choose yourself. Because the moment they think you've moved on may be the moment everything begins to shift. One of the most painful experiences in human relationships is realizing that someone only begins to understand your value after believing they have lost you. This does not always happen because people are cruel or careless. Often it happens because the human mind adapts quickly to what feels permanent. Presence becomes ordinary. Effort becomes expected. Loyalty becomes invisible. When someone consistently offers understanding, patience, support, or emotional availability, these qualities slowly stop feeling extraordinary in the eyes of the other person. They become part of the background, like air, necessary yet rarely noticed. There is a psychological tendency within people to underestimate what remains accessible. Certainty creates comfort, but comfort sometimes weakens awareness. When another person believes you will always answer, always forgive, always remain emotionally connected despite disappointment, they may stop recognizing the depth of your presence, not intentionally, but unconsciously. The mind becomes accustomed to receiving without questioning whether one day the source might disappear. The illusion begins to break when something changes. Not dramatic conflict, loud arguments. Sometimes the shift is silent. You stop explaining yourself. You stop seeking reassurance. You stop trying to repair every distance. Your energy withdraws. The emotional door that once remained open all the time is no longer standing wide. And this is when many people experience something unexpected: awareness. Absence has a strange psychological effect. It creates space where assumptions used to live. Someone who believed they understood your place in their life may suddenly confront uncertainty. They may notice routines changing, conversations becoming fewer, emotional access disappearing. What once felt guaranteed now feels fragile. The mind reacts strongly to lost certainty. Questions begin appearing. Why does their silence feel different? Why do I think about them more now? Why does their absence carry weight? Why do old memories return unexpectedly? People often assume longing appears because of love alone, but longing can also emerge from contrast. The difference between having access to someone and realizing that access is no longer the same can awaken emotions previously ignored. This does not mean every person suddenly becomes deeply remorseful, transformed. Human reactions differ. Some deny their feelings, some distract themselves, some convince themselves nothing changed. Yet internally, awareness may still grow. They begin seeing moments they overlooked, kindness they dismissed, efforts they took for granted, patience they assumed would never end. There is another difficult truth hidden beneath this process. Many individuals recognize emotional safety only after it disappears. While receiving it, they focus on flaws, expectations, or what feels missing. After distance forms, they begin understanding what that connection quietly provided: comfort, familiarity, acceptance, stability. The irony is painful. Sometimes your value becomes visible precisely when you stop proving it, because constant proving often weakens perception. What is repeatedly offered without limit may lose impact, but what withdraws creates reflection. This is why genuine moving on changes relationship dynamics. Real emotional detachment cannot easily be imitated. When someone stops waiting for validation, their energy shifts. They become calmer, less reactive, less dependent on outcomes. And others often sense this change before understanding. Yet the illusion people held that you would always remain emotionally available starts collapsing. For some, this realization becomes regret. For others, curiosity. For others, confusion. They wonder whether they misunderstood you, whether your feelings were deeper than they believed, whether their own feelings were less understood than they assumed. Yet there is danger in relying on these delayed realizations. Waiting for someone to finally recognize your worth can become another form of emotional captivity. A person may spend years hoping distance will create understanding in someone else, while neglecting their own growth. Your value cannot depend on another person's awakening, because awareness arrives differently for everyone. Some recognize loss quickly. Some recognize it years later. Some never recognize it at all. The deeper lesson is not that people eventually miss you. The deeper lesson is understanding how easily human beings overlook what feels permanent, and why protecting your self-worth matters. Remaining endlessly available in hopes of being appreciated often leads to exhaustion. True healing begins when your identity no longer depends on being fully seen. Those who underestimated you. There is quiet power in becoming someone who no longer needs delayed recognition to believe in their own worth. Silence is often misunderstood. Many people believe silence means weakness, surrender, indifference, or emotional emptiness. But silence can hold an extraordinary psychological force. There are moments when words lose their ability to create understanding, and what remains unspoken begins revealing more than explanations ever could. In relationships, especially emotional ones, constant talking sometimes hides the truth rather than exposing it. Repeated explanations, repeated efforts, repeated attempts to be understood can create noise, and noise prevents reflection. When you stop chasing, stop defending your feelings, or stop trying to convince someone of your value, an unfamiliar space appears between you and the other person. Most individuals are uncomfortable with empty spaces. The human mind naturally wants closure, certainty, and predictable patterns. When those patterns disappear, thought begins. Silence interrupts expectations. If someone became accustomed to your messages, your reactions, your forgiveness, your emotional availability, your sudden quietness can feel unusual. Not because silence itself is powerful, but because it removes distraction. It forces attention toward what was previously ignored. Many people only begin reflecting deeply when external reassurance disappears. As long as emotional access remains available, there is little pressure to examine behavior. The mind assumes there will always be another conversation, another explanation, another chance. Certainty postpones reflection. Silence changes certainty into uncertainty. Questions begin forming. Why did they stop explaining? Why are they no longer reacting? Why does their distance feel different this time? Did something end that I believed would always continue? The absence of answers often makes individuals confront themselves. This confrontation can be uncomfortable because reflection requires honesty, and honesty threatens the image people maintain about their choices, behaviors, or emotional responsibility. Not everyone welcomes this process. Some avoid it through distraction. Some become defensive. Some create stories to protect themselves. Others begin replaying memories with new awareness. Moments once dismissed may return with different meaning. A conversation previously ignored suddenly feels important. A gesture once overlooked becomes visible. Patience once taken for granted begins carrying weight. Silence has a way of altering perspective because distance reduces emotional noise. This is why arguments rarely produce the same level of reflection as absence. During conflict, individuals focus on defending themselves. Pride becomes active. Ego seeks protection. But silence removes immediate resistance. There is no debate to win, no explanation to reject, only thoughts remaining with themselves. And thoughts left alone long enough often become mirrors. Another important truth exists beneath silence. When you stop chasing someone, you reclaim energy once spent seeking validation. Constant pursuit can unintentionally teach others that your presence is guaranteed. Endless understanding without boundaries may create familiarity so strong that appreciation weakens. When pursuit ends, the emotional balance changes. This does not mean becoming cold or manipulative. Genuine silence is different from punishment. Silence used as control seeks reaction. Silence born from growth seeks peace. The difference matters. One says, "I want you to notice me." The other says, "I no longer need to force understanding." People often sense this distinction even without words. Real emotional withdrawal carries calmness rather than performance. And calmness can become unsettling to those who expected continued effort. Because when someone stops fighting for recognition, others sometimes begin questioning why reflection emerges. Not always immediately, not always dramatically. Human realization can be delayed. There are individuals who understand another person's importance months or years after emotional distance appears. Awareness moves slowly through some people because accepting truth may require confronting regret, missed opportunities, or personal responsibility. Silence creates the possibility for these confrontations. Yet, there is something equally important to understand. Your silence should never become a strategy designed to make others think. Living only to provoke reflection keeps your emotional life tied to external reactions. Silence reaches its deepest meaning when it becomes an act of self-preservation. When you stop over-explaining your pain, stop proving your intentions, stop carrying responsibility for being understood by everyone. There is unusual strength in becoming comfortable with misunderstanding. Because maturity sometimes means recognizing that not every person will understand your heart while you remain present. Some only understand after distance. Some understand too late. And some never understand. Your peace cannot wait endlessly for another person's reflection. Silence becomes powerful not because it changes others, but because it changes you. It teaches restraint. It teaches self-respect. It teaches that constant explanation is not always connection, and that being heard is different from repeatedly speaking. The quiet moments after you stop chasing often reveal who was listening, who was depending on your effort, and who only notices your value when your voice is no longer there. Human emotions do not always move in harmony with time. People often assume feelings appear immediately, that realization arrives in the moment something meaningful happens, and that understanding follows experience without delay. Yet, emotional awareness rarely behaves this way. There are individuals who recognize the importance of someone while they are present, but there are also many who only understand what they felt long after the connection has changed, weakened, or disappeared. This delayed understanding is more common than most people admit. A person may leave a relationship believing they were unaffected, certain of their choices, convinced they have moved forward without emotional consequence. During that period, distractions exist. Daily routines continue. New experiences appear. Pride protects old decisions. The mind creates explanations that preserve comfort. People become skilled at convincing themselves they feel less than they actually do. The human psyche often postpones difficult emotions because immediate confrontation can be uncomfortable. Regret is uncomfortable. Vulnerability is uncomfortable. Admitting attachment after distance forms can threaten the image someone holds of themselves. So awareness remains buried beneath activity, certainty, or emotional avoidance. But buried emotions rarely disappear. They wait, sometimes weeks, sometimes months, sometimes years. Then something unexpected happens. A memory returns without invitation. A familiar phrase is heard. An old conversation gains new meaning. Someone else fails to provide what was once quietly received. And suddenly, comparison begins. What once seemed ordinary becomes rare in memory. A science becomes noticeable. Support becomes noticeable. Understanding becomes noticeable. The person once taken for granted begins appearing differently in the mind. This delayed realization creates confusion because individuals often ask themselves why emotions are growing stronger after distance rather than weaker. They expect attachment to shrink with time. Yet, in some cases, awareness expands. Not because feelings were newly created, but because they were finally understood. Emotional delay is sometimes linked to certainty. When people believe someone will always remain emotionally available, urgency disappears. Appreciation becomes passive. Reflection feels unnecessary. Only when access changes does the mind re-evaluate what was assumed permanent. Loss has a way of clarifying perception. This does not mean every delayed realization becomes love. People often confuse regret, loneliness, guilt, nostalgia, and genuine emotional understanding. These experiences can overlap. Missing familiarity is not always missing a person deeply. Wanting comfort is not always wanting connection. Yet, there are moments when delayed awareness reveals something real. A person recognizes they misunderstood someone's value. They recognize affection hidden beneath routine. They recognize emotional safety they never named while receiving it. The painful part is timing. Understanding arrives after opportunities shift. Words become harder to say. Distance grows. Life changes. And realization meets silence. Some people carry this silent awareness for years without expressing it.